everybody. Welcome back to Downtime Activities, and welcome back to our as of yet unnamed video series where Erickson and I record ourselves having the conversations we were already having. Uh, we just try and ask a question to start and stick to the topic a little bit better than we normally do.
Brief aside,
This,
any ideas for a clever name for this? Throw that down in the comments,
we've
and
got
we've got
we've really got nothing.
we got nothing.
I feel like we've named series after pretty much every like
We're running out
sort
of
of
actions.
D&D thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Got the help action, we've got the bonus action. Cunning action, we've kind of tossed around a little bit, but I don't know if that makes a ton of sense.
we're not that cunning.
Uh, but this one is this one's potentially a hard topic
Definitely.
because it's about one of the moments in a game where everything can go horribly awry. Your entire campaign can come off the rails. The whole brain of your story can stop dead in its tracks without an obvious way forward. And this is something that I think a lot of DMs, especially newer DMs, have run afoul of. It's definitely something I've run afoul of in some of the games that I've run. Um, if you've run afoul of it, you've done a good job of masking it as far as our gameplay experience goes, I think. And that's what to do when nobody at the table manages to pass a vital check.
Very tricky question to answer, right? What do you do in that situation? And before we answer that question, I think we should start by talking about how to avoid having to answer that question, which is the classic kind of RPG game master advice, which is if you don't want there to be a chance for your players to fail at something, don't make them roll for it. And I think kind of furthermore, that kind of goes along with another piece of advice that's right in line with that, which is not every action or thing interaction in the game requires a roll for players to gain information or to be successful, right? Not every time you climb something do you have to make players make an athletics check. Climbing a ladder is easy for an able-bodied person to do. You don't have to roll an athletics check to climb a ladder. You shouldn't.
I literally climb ladders as part of my job.
You know, it's not something that like. There's always the chance of failure in the real world at that, I suppose. But there's a lot of things that don't require checks, and moreover, running a game, there's lots of things, especially if it's kind of lore dump sort of stuff where you're giving information vital to your story. You may not want to ask for the history check. It may be more of just if the players get to the location where the history piece that they need to help solve the answer or to bring them to the next clue of the big story, it's apparent to them because they fought to that point. Earning it is not rolling a check after they get there, it's getting to the place, right? So
If it is a vital check, especially something like a history check or a perception check or something like that, that's going to give them a piece of story vital information. The check should be a chance to get it early and not the only time they have a chance to get it. Which is one of the big pieces of advice for avoiding this is have backups.
yes.
If they're investigating something, if they're investigating the ancient archives and they're looking for a vital clue to
Oh, hello.
that should not be the
Oh.
one and only chance they have to get a hold of it.
Do you mind briefly repeating the last 10 to 15 seconds of what you just said? For those watching, this is a different sort of style to us recording this than we've done in the past because I now live half the country away. We don't do this in person anymore, so it's a recent move. We're doing this digitally, so there might be some little lag, hiccups, and tech issues. So you're talking about having backups, and I don't think I think there was a little bit of a lag spike there where we missed invaluable advice, I'm sure.
Whatever whatever check it is that you're having the players make, as I was sort of saying, like searching the grand archives for whatever vital piece of story information it is, the check that they all just failed shouldn't be the one opportunity they have to get that vital piece of information. There should be another way to get it elsewhere. There should be a reveal that's planned for later that will give it anyway. That check should honestly just be a way to get that information early.
Hmm.
and not necessarily the one and only time they have to get a hold of it.
I think you
Because
can also make it not even necessarily that they get it early, but that they get maybe uh, a more clear understanding or something along the lines of like, regardless the piece of information, they'll find it eventually, but you will be a bit more explicit in sort of the deciphering of that information instead of leaving some of that deciphering up to them. Kind of having
right.
the level of success not be like all or nothing. You get it regardless, but you might get more information from it that'll make whatever the next step is easier if you do better at the check. However, you will still know what the next step is regardless.
And of course, like an easy way to help avoid this issue, though it doesn't avoid it entirely, is to set lower difficulty checks
Mm-hmm.
for finding information. If the check is lower, the chance of them succeeding is higher. That's just math. Um, but of course, player characters don't always manage to do the mathematically proper thing. So,
And
um,
it can also be a like letting everybody make the check, if especially if it's your classic investigation, perception, find
mhm,
the clue sort of checks. Um, it could be something along the lines of like it's a DC of 10 or something fairly low in like a D&D system to find that thing. But if players roll really exceptionally well at it, they find something else there, maybe unrelated but still useful. They find, a lever that opens some secret section of the library, and in there's some powerful spell scrolls. Something along those lines, so that a player who does really well feels rewarded, but your story isn't derailed if no one does really well.
well, and it's if all of your story important pieces of information or all of your encounter important uh, moments are hidden behind necessary checks like that, you should probably rethink some of your design
Mm-hmm.
as far as your campaign goes. Um, because relying on friendly NPCs who have the knowledge that they need, that they have to go through a big quest in order to rescue, instead of, um, acquiring an ancient tome, still gets the same effect of sending them off on a whole adventure. But then that NPC is just going to share the information with them, like
Yes.
no check required, um, or that kind of thing. Just tends to avoid the problem of like, well,
Roll
sorry
high
everybody,
or game over.
yeah, 2 dungeons ago you guys missed the vital clue that you needed that was scrolled on the ceiling in order to advance here. Um, so
Shrug.
sorry.
Yeah, I think that by and large, hidden bits of information or things like that should be used, but they should not be the common piece needed for the next step of a big story arc. I think more
Mhm.
often than not, the information you need should be the reward for completing some section of this quest, not just something hidden behind a check in an area where the quest is taking place. Um,
Mhm.
However, this is some good advice for avoiding it. Let's talk about, I mean, even if you are using all this advice, without a doubt, you will accidentally do this. There's a DM sort of brain thing where you'll be like, okay, I have a loose idea, this is the next step of what they need. It's going to be in this area. Okay, they're in this area. Yeah, hey, everyone roll a perception check for me real quick. And then you're going to say that, and everyone's going to roll, and they're going to be like, 3, 2, crit fail, 4. And you're going to be like, shit, why did I just ask for that? Right? And you're going to have to start to you're going to kind of do that backpedal of like, okay, what in that situation do you think you do? Because those slip ups will happen where you're kind of just DMing on the fly, and now you feel like you've locked something they need behind a check that they've all rolled really poorly at.
Well, I feel like you kind of have a couple of different options. If it's something that they need immediately, a solution for the puzzle they're trying to solve or whatever, just let them sit there and wallow in it until somebody decides to make a check again in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I think by and large, you can do that, and it's something we've ran into a lot. And fairly recently, we got stuck inside a massive, well, to get ourselves out, but we were stuck with a massive puzzle, uh, and the way to solve it, somebody's familiar failed a check to see,
Mm-hmm.
and we were then just sort of stuck messing around with that puzzle until we sort of went back and re-examined the ground we'd already been over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it can be a little frustrating, but it is, I think, a valid option. If it's information that they don't need for a while, if it's end game information and you're in the middle of the campaign, I think it's totally fine to let them move on without that information and find another way later to give it to them. Um,
Don't be married to your notes,
Whether that
right?
right,
It doesn't
absolutely.
have to only exist there. You can absolutely decide that that ancient scroll, if they didn't know, they didn't have some piece of lore telling them that ancient scroll was there, it's somewhere else now. And that's, they missed something else in that. And that will keep your
Or
campaign able to run.
or the villainous faction that's been hunting them the whole campaign, has that villainous scroll now because they came through the tomb after them and found it. And now, that becomes another quest that you can set them on later in the game, is having to infiltrate their fortress or attack one of their outposts in order to try and get a hold of it.
You can almost even flip it too and have it be that they find where it was. They roll poorly on it. Maybe you change that to they find, it's like, well, you roll bad, but it doesn't really matter because what you find is the absence of this, but the sign that someone else was here before you.
Absolutely.
And that can work as well.
That gives you a way to sort of mask, to sort of still have that be a failure, but to sort of mask it in a story way, and then give them a route forward. Because that's the reason these vital checks suck so bad, is if everybody fails them, the route forward has vanished.
Exactly.
It's we've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, and we constantly run into the issue, usually with minor stuff, little bits of treasure you can find along the way, where it's like, well, the two of us didn't see this trap that we know is over here because we've played the game before. Grab the other companion and walk them over here.
Yeah.
Nope. Well, we've all failed. Okay, somebody walk through the door then.
Guess we'll die.
It's that feeling of just the perception check failed, 4 times over, just feels bad. And it leaves you feeling, at least in regards to that thing, like there's no route forward. But I think finding the absence of something is an excellent way to still have them fail the check, but give them a route forward, give them something to investigate, give them another adventure to go on.
Exactly. And then it's adding content, not taking content away, right? Another option here that I think you can't use consistently, but if you have that once or twice a campaign slip up of that sort of a situation, something you can also do is insert a trap that wasn't there before that they set off. Like if they're in this sort of ancient library, maybe they roll really badly. They still find the secret thing, but they don't notice the fact that in doing so, they've disturbed some ancient librarian who will awaken and then fight them. So they'll still be able to get the piece, but because they weren't successful at the check, they've caused themselves to have to get into a combat or to have to avoid some other trap. Maybe all of a sudden something gets, set off to where they're on a time crunch now and the building is collapsing around them because they set some trap off, and now they have to get that and get out of there. And maybe they'll miss out on some other treasure that was deeper in the place, but they at least have the piece that they need to pursue the quest line they're on. You can absolutely You can absolutely do that. Yeah, someone takes a little bit of... Yeah, some glyph of warning goes off that they didn't notice, whatever it is. You can make it so that there still feels like there's punishment there, that they failed that check, but you're not stealing away the rest of this story arc because this one vital piece of information is locked behind a check they didn't make.
And there are times where the only thing you can do is stand by your threats as a DM. Which normally what you're doing by doing so, by making the decision to like I made, the threat was clear as the game master, and now you're going to suffer the consequences. Normally the goal of that is to teach the players a lesson or to accomplish something in a similar vein. Not needlessly punish your players, but make a clear statement about something in the world or something in the game that you're playing. This isn't quite the same thing because they didn't choose to fail the checks.
Yes.
That's just how the dice fell. But
this wasn't you describing some wall covered with with a bunch of these guards on active patrol on it, and then being I charge it, and okay, you get shot by 10 crossbows, idiot. That's clearly not the way to do this. It's very different when it's they're trying to do this in a thoughtful, good way, and they just roll bad, and you don't want them to lose content and lose story because of that.
and it's fine to just, if it is a truly vital check, it's probably not something you want to do, but it is fine to kind of stand by your threats as a DM and just let the players figure out another way to solve the problem, or let the world kind of present another solution later on. And it's also totally fine for that failure to not be the end of that encounter. Um, you know, it's been made clear that if you all, fail this stealth check, this vital stealth check, that, like, one of the guards is going to rush into down to this room or whatever and burn the documents that you need. Oh well, everybody's failed the stealth check. It was 3 critical failures and a 4. That doesn't mean that you get thrown into a cutscene where that happens.
Yeah.
Like,
you might be able to still move quick
failed,
enough to stop them.
You've all failed a vital check. You are now on a ticking clock. The risk is high, but it is now up to you to, like, find a creative way forward. Like, that's totally acceptable, and that's
cut to video from second Lord of the Rings movie with the Uruk-hai with the torch running and getting hit with arrows as he's running towards the bomb. Like, literally.
Exactly. It's you can have sort of stages of failure. You can absolutely have degrees of failure, and you can absolutely sort of change what it is that they've failed. Like that, adding a trap that wasn't there before is an excellent way to sort of disguise the role that they had to make as looking for the trap and not looking for the object. Simply because failed it bad enough that, like, well, the game says there needs to be some sort of punishment,
yes,
but it can't be one that cripples the game.
Yeah. Another good thing here that I think is a really smart thing you can do is change what the new requirement is for them to get that piece of information and give that as explicit information of their own thought. That's weirdly worded. Let me give an example to make some sense of that. They fail that stealth check. The guy runs down and burns the documents. You rush in and see the documents in ashes. Whoever's maybe kind of like has like a soldier background or something like that, you can say to that player all of a sudden that, like, as you look at those burning documents, like, you have a sudden realization that makes you sick to your stomach, which is, with these burned, our only option now is to get this information from the person who wrote those documents to begin with, and that's the general. We have to now track him down. That's the only way we're going to find this piece of information. Like, you can give that as a like thought in the back. Like, you understand this because of your background, because of your class, because of your character's backstory. You understand what you have to do now to get this missing piece, and it's going to be much harder than read a piece of paper. So now they know what their next step is.
And NPCs are an excellent way to convey that information. The documents got burned. They got there too late. They have to go back to the person they were trying to get the documents for, and it's like, well, okay, well, that sucks. Looks like we'll have to get a hold of the general then.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I was trying to avoid this, but that's what we got to do.
But I guess that's what we have to do now.
Because it's something to remember, and it's something that, to me, sometimes feels like cheating when I'm running a game. NPCs are not necessarily just a static piece of your world. They can come up with plans and present them to the players as well.
Mm-hmm.
They can come up with suggestions as to how players should accomplish certain objectives.
And sometimes players should listen to them instead of jumping into the apple crate. But that's beside the point.
It feels a little bit like cheating as a game master to have NPCs suggest plans or suggest a way to go about something. But in the real world, that's what happens. Like, the people standing around aren't necessarily just passive observers of everything that's going on. And those plans don't always have to be good plans either.
No. Depending on the NPC and how intelligent they are, how good of a scope of knowledge they have for that sort of situation.
Right.
It also...
NPCs can give that kind of vital information and can give those paths around failing those vital checks.
Yeah, and as long as the NPC is giving that advice or giving that information in a way that the players take and run with, instead of laying out what the players do and then the players follow that step by step exactly, then the players will still have agency. I think that DMs feel like what their worry is that they're like making the game easy. They're giving them the free right answer to the problem, which that's not really the case. You shouldn't really be worried about that as a game master. You should be worried about taking player agency away and making it feel like they're not making decisions still. If you can introduce a path to players through an NPC suggestion, then they still have to take that and act on it, and the specifics of that are still up to them, and that still allows the agency to be there.
And once again, anything that happens involving the players, as soon as the players take control of it, is beyond the DM's,
Oh, yeah.
completely beyond the DM's control. For example, the Star Wars, the very first real play content that we put on the channel, which is this super low quality audio only recording of us doing a little 3-player Star Wars campaign. There's the main plan that you guys go with for this sort of big, impossible prison rescue was suggested by an NPC. Knowing, sort of with me knowing full well that it still requires you guys to do all of the legwork and to, make all of the decisions and make all the checks once you're there. But it's also intended to put you in a very awkward situation eventually. Like, the plan does not by any means make it easy when you guys, disguised as an Inquisitor and Purge Troopers, come face to face with a bunch of actual Inquisitors and a bunch of actual Purge Troopers, and that you then have to try and talk your way out of that situation.
To make a metaphor here, I think that the way you kind of can use this well is don't build train tracks for them to ride on. Build a 4-lane highway for them to drive on and put a lot of crazy drivers on it, right? Like, make it so that they have the path in front of them, but they still have to overcome all these obstacles and decide how to maneuver it. And that is a good way. That is kind of going off on another tangent here, but that sort of NPC assistance is a good cop-out, bailout sort of situation if you have that check get missed. They can then
it's a way for them to get around that check eventually.
Exactly. It's a good way to give them another path to get to that same result, albeit maybe harder or differently.
And once again, talking about player agency in that way, that's kind of removing player agency is what you're doing by bottlenecking them through a single vital check that has to be succeeded, otherwise the campaign falls apart. That's if you take a step back and look at it, that's kind of what you're doing is, forcing a problem to be solved in a singular, specific way, and not being willing to deal with the repercussions of that should it fail. And it's best to, avoid those checks entirely, even by just letting the player characters solve that problem the way they want to solve it, and not, being a dick about it when it's not the way you thought that problem should be solved.
And one last other kind of little piece of advice here, if it's a check, if you're really wanting to get that feeling of you want there to be a piece that's locked behind some sort of check, and you want there to be you have to pass the Arcana, you have to have deep knowledge of Arcana to decipher and understand this. Either don't make it vital, but if you do, if you feel it's unavoidable, there's a vital piece of arcane information to solve the curse that you're trying to lift off the land or whatever, and you feel like it has to be an Arcana check, you can also kind of use math to your advantage and make it a series of checks instead of a single one, and make it so that it's a certain number of successes before a certain number of failures, and then all of a sudden that character who's good at Arcana won't get just goozled by one bad roll. If they've got their expertise Arcana character who's super intelligent, they're rolling 5 times, not 1. Mathematically, they're even more likely. Just they're not going to have that one crit fail ruin their chances of success. A series of checks can help that.
And in the same way, using math to your advantage, it's not a bad idea to impress upon the characters that this may be a quite important check, and to load them up with
Bardic inspiration,
guidance, or
enhance ability spells
to make sure that everybody has points of inspiration before you go rolling into that, or other ways to re-roll that check. And there are plenty of ways to do that kind of subtly, so that they have all the resources they need to succeed at that check without, or give certain characters advantage if they're uniquely suited to finding that piece of information or passing that check. There's ways to do that subtly without it
without feeling like it's a gimme, right?
Right. And without, and with minimizing the risk of failing that check to just derailing the whole thing.
So basic advice here: don't do it. Don't make a single check be what's locking out players from vital campaign altering information, story stuff that they need to carry on. Don't make a single die roll determine whether or not they'll have access to that. If you mess up and do, follow along with some of those other stuff. Don't be married to your notes. Things don't have to go exactly how you wrote it before. You can change where stuff is, how they get to stuff, how many places that information is, who has it. All that kind of stuff can be much more broad than what you have written just in your notes you made before that session. So adapt and do so. And if there is failure, if you do make that, if that situation comes up, find a way to still get it to them, albeit make it harder, make it punishing, make there be a trap that goes off before they get it, make it be time sensitive, whatever it is. You can do it in a way that failure feels punishing, but the game still goes on and the story still goes on. And I think that's probably where we'll stop this. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you found it useful. This is a tricky situation to be in. I think everyone who's been a DM has found themselves in this situation on a multitude of times. Do your best to avoid it. But when it happens, hopefully this little bits of advice gives you some tools in the toolkit to kind of avoid it being a problem. Thank you for watching this. And if you like this kind of stuff, feel free to check out the rest of the channel. We've got a ton of content ranging from RPG play, these sorts of conversations, longer conversations with our bonus action series, more specific conversations with the help action series, kind of going over specific rulings and sort of rules and systems and how best to use them. All sorts of stuff for all your RPG and storytelling nerd needs. So please give that a check out. Now, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.